premeditated community. It's non-accidental community. I think we all live in accidental communities, and just the people we are surrounded by are the people that we live in community with. But the idea of having some premeditation with that community, actually forming legal infrastructure, that we're talking about, and having a shared purpose, or just intention.
Like, for me, it's like breaking down what is the intention being set, and you know, how do we find the agreements and like the fair exchange of how that's going to work out, like the duties, the roles, like, as he's been mentioning, you know, the side that's not pretty, I feel has come from like a lack of support of communities in general by a lot of the social structures we have, which make like alternative education, or even now trying to grow gardens in inner cities, like we have to do all these loopholes and land building permits, you know. So to come together like an intention, like that's the vision, and the heart can be put into that, but then it's like more of the journey of a lot of the struggles that it takes to actually form a community. And like in my own journey of like discovering and visiting and living on one in Hawaii for a few months and being a part of inner city ones too, it's like it's incredible, the loopholes, no matter if you're in the inner city or outer city, like the permits and the ways of being that don't allow fair energy exchange and models to be put into place. And that's once you've, you know, passed the test of actually the agreements and creating a field of agreements, you know, a code of honor that and how the, you know, the village or the intentional community is going to form. So for me, it's holding the vision and creating hard technology through facilitation, you know, group meetings and nonviolent communication, how that looks like, and how do you hold the vision and allow it to explore to the way it wants to go, but yet go through those rough parts as a community. And I think, you know, that's really the tricky part, is the groundwork, setting the structure, but being flexible with what wants to happen, and creating ways for, you know, members to come in and out if they need to be, if they feel that it's not, you know, ready, they're not ready to explore that deeper community.
So I'm going to quote a guy named Frank Varnado, who helped us start the Miccosukee Land Co-op in Tallahassee, Florida. And they're my favorite community that I went to, because they couldn't afford land, so they bought a swamp. And there's a bunch of friends. And there are all these examples of rural-based communities. And they were a bunch of friends who wanted to live together. And they bought a swamp and built platforms over the swamp and pathways between houses. And the land was put in easement, so there was a level of bureaucracy, an engagement of local bureaucracy and government to make that land preserved, allow it to be preserved. And then they just lived together. So you get people who shared ownership over land that was a swamp, transformed it in a way to preserve the land but live in it sustainably, grew food in the high places. And when I asked him what made that place appealing to them, because the average person doesn't often want to live in a swamp, he said, well, we chose to live here. Everyone in the town where I grew up inherited this space. Like, they kind of like were given it because their parents lived there or work was there, and we chose it. And I would say that, to me, like, what I see in intentional communities is that when people come together with a shared value system, especially when it's based on friendship rather than rules, and there's a shared enthusiasm and a commitment to honesty within that space, communities seem to work. And whereas there are other examples of communities across the country that are income sharing, that are behaviorist, that are socialist, where there are charters and rules about them. And I actually, in the time that I've been there, photographing, visiting, and living, I've seen more turnover there than in communities that are based on friendship and values.
Thinking about intentional community, I was thinking like shared vision, shared end goal. But then I was thinking about all the necessities of having a diverse group of people in order to get there. And I think it's challenging sometimes when we form intentional communities. We bring a lot of like-minded people together, but then we also kind of put up walls to keep other people out, and it can become limiting, and it's not able to be replicated. And so a lot of times people in a lot of low-income situations aren't able to choose where they live or who they associate with, just based on socioeconomic status. And those that have done that in the past, throughout at least the history of the U.S., have been taken out by COINTELPRO, like the CIA and FBI, including like the Black Panther Party and Mumia Abu-Jamal and the MOVE organization. When people form this intentionality in urban spaces that challenge the status quo or the current paradigm we're in, that was one of the biggest challenges to the institution that we live in the United States, and they were taken out with violence. So it's just interesting to see in intentional communities what your intention is and how that affects the paradigm that you live in. So I don't really have an answer. I think it's just learned a lot listening to everyone, and I don't know where that happy medium is to keep it open so that you're always challenged with different opinions, but also have a common end goal that you can achieve.
I guess when I think of intentional community and the space is sort of my only, like sort of my introduction to the idea of intentional community, I hear in the phrase, I'm more attracted to the intention part. So the idea that if people are acting with intention and knowing what they're doing and why, and sort of paying attention to that, and also acting with attention, so that you can be around other intentional people, that a community can be created, or sort of born almost naturally. So your intention doesn't even have to be community, but your intention is clear to you, and you're around other people with intention. Then you sort of, a community is like a byproduct of that, and you begin to nurture it together. Yeah, and I think I like the idea of people's relationships with the community or the space, that they're there on purpose, kind of like you were saying. So wherever you are, the community or the space, the container that holds it, is you're there very much just as you are with the other people. You're with the space and relate to the space that you're in intentionally.
First, I think many corporate businesses, or like any kind of business, can have an intentional community and begin to bring in elements of that by like consciously gathering, not just for meetings, but really connecting with each other consciously. And I know many people who are working, especially at CIS, on developing projects where they're bringing like wellness consulting into corporations and bringing knowledge of superfoods and other healthy foods and yoga technologies, meditation. So there's that space to become more conscious and not just running the hamster wheels of a system together, but really creatively working together. We were like trying to get someone from Google here to talk, because I know they have some really creative and interesting ways that people work in common space there, and freedoms and things like that. And I think Evolver is an interesting example of intentional community in a very dynamic sense of a big international network that is both a physical thing and an online community. And I think there are several of those cropping up. There's a new thing called tribal convergence that's a combination of land-based communities, global wisdom councils, and conscious media. And I think the potential of a network like that, and Occupy as well as an intentional community, and people gathering around a shared intention, the 99%, the 100%, all kind of waking up together and being in physical space together, but also sharing these revolutionary and awakening awareness memes through the internet, through all the imagery that people are using. I think that's really fascinating and an interesting element of intentional community to bring into the discussion.
I grew up on a farm with my grandparents next door, my parents, my aunt and uncle across the street, my cousins, my sister and I. And I used to ask, there were a certain number of rules around the farm, like how we all organized land. The land was held in trust. so one person couldn't sell it off or develop it. And so there was a structure around it, but my father used to have a line where he said, like, a circus is magic if you don't see the strings. And so for growing up within the community, it worked because there's a certain agreements that were in place for how we used land, how we grew food, the relationships that we had with bartering with neighbors, that we didn't even have to think about because they were there and they worked.
Well, I can think of a very tangible one is my daughter is being babysat by my house. And that was when we had our daughter, it was 2 years ago, it really became incredibly visceral how important community is. It's just, I don't know how many here have kids, but Jesus Christ, it's a lot of work, and I don't know how people do it just as a nuclear family. And even as it is, we have 7 people in our house, and people are really active about helping out, and it's still hard. So there's that. We share food. We have a CSA basket that comes through, and we share chores, or we help pay for the house cleaner to come in every once in a while. It's just mathematically, just pure physics is more efficient. It is just a more efficient way of living. And the fact that we are not living that way right now is purely because of the fossil fuels. We have this little bubble where we have this surplus of energy that has allowed us not to rely on each other in the ways in which we're going to have to do again. And yeah, I feel like it's been a lifelong experiment for me, and so far away from actually getting to what I feel like a functional, balanced community is. There's food production. I mean, that piece is huge, and there's child care that isn't just every once in a while. It's something that we're looking to move. We're actually going to create another community, and we're looking for space more in the country. And it is just so apparent how this world is not designed for community. It is designed, like you were saying, the loopholes and the legals, and even the land. We have this piece of land up there. We own the land. We're not allowed to build even yurts or tents, or there's like all these permitting, and literally the legal infrastructure of our world is designed to separate us. And this, the new community that we want to form is actually smaller than we're at now. It's just a few families who want to share childcare, and it is so hard to find a house, number one, that's big enough, where the architecture is designed to support more than a nuclear family. Never mind landlords that are willing to rent to two or three couples, and it is just kind of like waking up in the Matrix. Really, like all we want to do is come together, and there's so many forces that are designed to actually keep us apart. It's discouraging.
What comes up for me is sort of like you were sharing about different people having different gifts, and one thing I've experienced in community is people might have their gift, but without a context or a community, not know that it's worthwhile or not know how to use it. And to watch people come together in a way where like someone's gift might be, might be playing with words, and someone else might be like stick figures, and and suddenly someone's project could use that person, and there's just so much more opportunity with a lot of people with different strengths, that projects that could have never been born if everybody just kind of stayed in their areas of expertise without it. So it's just sort of that serendipitous collision, I guess, of differences. And I think it also helps people. I've seen a lot of people here unhook from their idea of like, this is the way to whatever our goal is, like this is the thing I'm going to evangelize, and start, you have community, everybody has slightly different takes on the path towards oneness, then a little more detachment comes from the cause and more focus on the results, and more fluidity in that way. So
what I've learned from the benefits of community, as well as like organizations in general, like thriving businesses and models, is that when there is this like search, this quest for like empowerment, like to become sovereign from like no longer complaining about the way society has created this or that. Like we're empowered and sovereign by the fact that all of nature, the universal, what's known as the universal core values of nature, also known as like the natural laws of the universe, that is what's created a world that thrives. There's nothing in nature that's not thriving. Earthquakes, volcanoes, everything is like releasing, you know, static energy when it's stuck. It's like, so there's like this constant energy and flow, and that gives birth to like a tree that can feed villages, you know, from like the seeds, you know. And so when businesses thrive in that, that's when everybody comes together and is on this like train of momentum of sovereignty and freedom, and they begin to like release all the stuck patterns in individuals through that, because it's like this, you've stepped on a train together, and there's like, you know, the hearts are in communion, and there's like, you know, it's like Martin Luther King and Gandhi was like the freedom fighters, like they led the way through just like this empowered like centeredness in the heart. They had that like that goal of like, we will get to like, let's call it the promised land, because together like we can, you know, like, and therefore everybody is like a co-leader, a co-facilitator in that journey, and everybody's strength becomes everybody else's like collaborative strength, you know, because you go in that process together. And I think that's the beauty of pushing through our beliefs and our patterns that keep us like living small and in non-sustainable situations.
I feel like one of the things that when we're living in our house, we have these meetings, right? So it's part of the intentionality where we don't just let things build up and then explode all over each other. We explode all over each other in our meetings. And it is often painful. I mean, these meetings are, you know, it's coming together. It's people coming together and with baggage and, you know, stuff that need to work out. And there's often people crying and, you know, harsh words. And it's just, it's intense. And after every meeting, I can't speak for everybody there, but everyone is still there, so there must be something. But I feel like we've evolved. I feel like we've worked through that stuff, and we're better for it. And like I feel like we've taken ourselves to another level. And I think that's also part of the fear of community for people. For myself, I know it is. It's just, every time I go into these meetings, I have this fear a little bit, like, oh, geez, here we go again. But we have other gatherings that are not meeting orientated to help counterbalance that. But I think I'd like to hear other people talk about it. You know, do they have concerns about community? Because mine is that there's this baggage that other people have. You got to deal with people's crap and my own crap, and it's not easy. It's ugly, and is that something other people or think about?
Yeah, I live in an intentional community called Earth Honey Haven in the Oakland Hills, and we found out like the first year was a lot of that, and we sort of developed a way of holding each other more in support and moving toward a new story and co-creation, and not bringing so much of the baggage into the collective field, but like having really strong individual practices and support from our community outside of that and through the house for dealing with that stuff, because it's like a healing space and think tank. So there are a lot of, you know, people coming through and teaching different techniques for clearing, healing, collective processes, visionary collective processes for co-creating and group healing and stuff. So that's been really helpful, and we've got past I feel like a lot of people live in intentional communities talk about that. It's just, all the crap, and really intense when you're living that closely with a large group of people. I mean, it's sort of similar to growing up with your family. I mean, there's drama that you go through too, but I feel like in intentional community, there's, right now anyway, that I see examples of, there's a commitment to clearing that and not just perpetuating these cycles of like you fighting with whoever it is in your family that you have an issue with. And like I think through that there's a really huge collective healing that's happening as more people live this way, as we learn to drop some of the conditioning and patterns and use tools like nonviolent communication to really communicate clearly with each other and hold each other in our highest light. That's been helpful in my experience.
I think of it like we had it got easier over time. Like the last couple of years, few years has been really easy. And I feel like we've pushed through a lot of that stuff. And the nonviolent communication, I think it reminds me of, I was thinking the other day, is like we don't know how to live in community. We need training, like nonviolent communication training. We don't know how to talk to each other in a way that is, non-confrontational. And I feel like that is, the nonviolent communication thing is huge. I mean, I don't know much about it, but I'd like to know more.
There's a lot of that happening in the Occupy movement too, especially in the Bay Area. People are doing nonviolent communication trainings. I haven't jumped into that work a lot, but I'd like to know more about it and what they're doing and what the effects of that have been.
So, a couple years ago, we decided to create a community garden, but not in the sense of everyone having an individual plot, but as in a communally cared for piece of land, in order to get young people from this BC prevention clinic that we work with out into this space. So we wanted to do it real close to the hospital, and we tried to work with the hospital, and obviously they make their money off of people feeling ill, and they get a lot of money from pharmaceuticals, and they're always developing and building to bring in more money to expand their operation. So they just spun us around in circles in terms of where we could get access to land. We had to go through, layers and layers of lawyers. Finally, we found a piece of land that was right down the street in a public park, and our intention was to bring these young people out to this public space that we all collectively own, through paying taxes or not paying taxes, just being here. And we started this project, and we got really integrated with the community, as well as with doctors in the clinic. And we created something that was really, I think, different. We landscaped a whole perimeter of a 1-acre public park. We planted 35 fruit trees. We didn't ask permission for it. We put in a huge mural. And basically they gave us permission for one little section to have a garden, but when we saw that we had community support and we were building community, we decided to expand. So for the last 2 years, we've been fighting the city week after week. Different departments, they figured out it wasn't even zoned as a park after going a year and a half through the whole parks process, working with city council, and so everything was set up saying that we see your intention behind it, but there's all these rules, and we have to follow rules because we work for this city that's broken. And so I think we saw the challenges. Instead of letting it beat us down, it actually helped create community. It brought so many more people together. So actually it was kind of like the skin on the drum that the harder we got beat down by the city, the louder we bounced back. And so neighbors started getting really pissed off, and I think sometimes anger is a gift if you do the right thing with it. So people were getting really angry. They didn't know where they were generating all this heat. And so we started meeting in neighborhood committees and figuring it out. And then all these people from the neighborhood started coming out and sharing, like, oh, I'm a landscape architect, I can sign off on this. And I'm an arborist, and I can sign off on this. And went through this whole ridiculous process for 2 years and put thousands of dollars and hours. And we're still not even halfway through it, but we took a step back and we realized, wow, we started off with this 4 people working on this, and now we have 40 or 50 people that give money to the garden, come to weekly meetings. We have monthly potlucks. We still don't get permits. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But just engaging that negative force, which was just the bureaucracy, in a way that brought people together was an amazing experience. And I think I'm happy that that happened. So I think sometimes when you're bouncing up against bureaucracy, that's how you do coalition building. And that's how you meet your neighbors, when people share a common interest, and that's what they come around, a common goal, and that's what community organizing is about. It's about finding a problem that's easily attainable and something that you can win, and bringing people around shared ideas and incrementally winning and building power, which is the ability to act. So I think, intentional communities are collectives. It's building our collective power, and I think that's built through struggle. So it's not always the bureaucracy, sometimes the path to building the community.
And what comes to mind, I've really been enjoying having your nature metaphors, and some challenges I see sometimes is having a really big vision and then being able to sort of honor the natural growth to get there as opposed to rush it. So in some ways, I think some of the projects like you're talking about, starting with 4 people on a small plot of land, like there's something that feels really appropriate in that to me, that you like start with like literal seeds in your case and grow something out of it, and in that you can have a lot of care and attention for details along the way, like really connect with the people that are involved and like pay attention to the details, which are actually the things that people kind of, I think, fall in love with and can help stay committed. And so one of the challenges I've seen, we had a really big vision and got a really big space, and then now trying to kind of catch up to that and fill it and make sure that all the people that are coming through are honored and taken care of, and given the number of people we have. Yeah, it's something I didn't understand going into this, but trying to catch up, and then if I would do it again or starting new projects or parts of this, is taking it a lot more slowly, like starting right where we are and growing out, instead of like dreaming really big and then like rushing there.
We've heard of Buckminster Fuller, the great culture designer, created the geodesic dome and all these amazing things built on nature. So he created something called design science, and it was built more around the idea that every challenge, there's a solution. And when you create that solution, you learn and grow more than any other thing, so you're actually thankful for the challenge. So with that, every challenge is a solution, every breakdown leads to breakthrough, is where the creative spirit sort of is charged. So that's kind of how I've been influenced with a lot of the community work I do, is like we go straight into the heart of the matter, which is what wants to emerge, what is seeking to emerge, and what are the solutions. And that's when like all these models like the World Cafe or mind mapping, when we come together and have like amazing amounts of fun, instead of getting really heady about the challenges, we go straight into that. And that's the difference between, that's like the bridge to thriving, is going right into solutions. And you'd be surprised with all the solutions you come up with and how they can apply to other things. So everything around you will start thriving from the idea of just going into it as solutions. And so a lot of that, is just releasing what is not working and honoring that lesson, but seeing the challenge as basically a game, as like an invitation to grow together and to create solutions.
Everyone's talking about this great transition, and I think there's this Oscar Wilde line where he says things aren't what they used to be, and what's worse, they never were. And I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I see a great transition. I sort of see the world is big enough for people to create what they want to create out of it. And some good trends and technologies that could go in good ways. I'm hopeful for a small bit of happiness in the midst of that, regardless of great transitions.
There's a group in Brazil called the MST, and this isn't like hundreds of people, or it's like thousands of landless peasants that are reclaiming land from the Brazilian government under their constitution, which grants any land that's fallow, and those that occupy it then own it. And so this is groups of 50,000 people setting up communities, and they do it using direct action. And they've lost a lot, and a lot of people have been murdered through like people that make money off of cattle grazing, off of different types of oils that are grown for biofuels and whatnot on that land. But overall, it's been this amazing movement, and it's connected with Dia Campesina too, which is a landless peasant movement in India and Central America and Mexico. So there's all these people's movements that are coming together, and they're actually forming intentional communities shared on the principle that they're poor people, and rather than being powerless, if they're the majority, if they're the 99%, then they hold the power. And I see that now that people have the ability to share media, it's really quickly spreading, which is really dangerous to the power structure. Because when people see how easy it is to attain land, like in this country, we're so fearful of the police. Like when you watch Al Jazeera or any kind of real media, you see people, they show mass movements of people being in the streets and challenging authority, like in Greece, all over the world. In the United States, we're all really scared of the police. We don't want to get arrested, and you know, when they shoot tear gas, it's this big thing. But young people rising up all over the country, all over the world, it's happening. And when people see that, they get encouraged that there can be change, and then they come together around these shared pieces. So I'm really excited for this social media. I used to be really anti-Twitter and anti-Facebook, but to see like poor people that, you know, 5 years ago they didn't have a cell phone, they still don't have running water or electricity, but they walk into town to charge a cell phone so they can, you know, give Twitter feeds. It's the same thing that's happening in Palestine. People sharing their movement with the international community, and there's this intentionality around it. And I think it's just, we're jumping this huge gap, and I don't think the power structure, just like World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, they don't know how to catch up and slow down this international resistance movement. So I'm just really excited, especially since it's really land-based and it's coming to this country. And you know, it started in Tunisia with a poor student who couldn't get a job, and so he started a produce stand in Tunisia, and then he got cracked down because he didn't have permits, and that's when the whole Arab Spring started, December of last year, you know, a year ago. And so it's just amazing that something a little like that around food can just spread a cool movement.
What you're saying about the web and Twitter, it's like, I feel like the Google model. There's an interesting article in the New York Times a week or two ago where said the Google model of the internet is a person alone in their room searching for things and finding answers. And the Facebook model of the internet is a person with 1,000 friends or 400 friends collectively getting to know things and sharing them with other people. And I actually think the world, I mean, we kind of will use both in the future, but I do like the idea that intentional communities don't have to be isolationist or absolute things. You know, that I think oftentimes when I refer to like a commune as a place that's in the woods, that's off-grid, that's isolated. And the way I grew up and the way that I live now, it's like you borrow, I mean, I don't own a lawnmower, but let's say if I was to own a lawnmower, I would hope that there'd be one per street, and everyone would share that thing. And then we can buy food locally, seasonally, organically, and barter for things. It's like there's everyday practices that happen in a much less absolute but more easy to access way that everybody can do, that actually have a pretty large social impact.
They seem to be love-based instead of fear-based. Like a lot of them are brought together out of a desire for something or a love of something instead of out of a fear of something. And I definitely, there's a role for activism and changing the structures that exist. But the thing that excites me is that these communities are coming up as like examples, and they're like building the world that we're transitioning into, and just rather than breaking, like fighting something or tearing something down, just like build the new world and kind of hope in some ways that because it's a better way to live, that the old structures will sort of will decay.
I mean, I did in 2012 and hearing about this for a long time, and I was always just like, what, well, whatever. And then I started looking at exponential curves of technology growth and resource depletion and debt growth. And I do feel like something's happening. And I've been studying the monetary system for about 15 years, and wow, that's a whole quagmire of the Federal Reserve and how that's all manipulated. And something's happening with the money system. I don't know if it's happening now, but sooner or later it's going to happen. And it's an opportunity. I think it's an incredible opportunity, because we just can't keep going. We have a society that's built on linear growth. Nothing in nature lasts very long in linear growth. It just crashes. So I think it's an exciting time. I think it's really an exciting time. And actually, when I was watching a movie there was some, whoever it was you interviewed, was saying this thing about whether we have to, the food goes first, then we have to get the ammo. I love that line. You know, whether it gets to this transition, this great transition where it gets hard or not, it doesn't matter. Like, this is the way we thrive. This is how we thrive, is when we live with each other and we get over our fear and go into love, and really embrace each other and you know, in ways that we never have before. I mean, that's evolution. It's part of evolution. And whether it's forced upon us because, you know, things collapse or we choose to do it, we're going to have to do it. And I think it's exciting. I'm totally pumped up.
Yeah. That's actually my takeaway message from like that 5 years of traveling, was that even if except all these people that I was photographing, oh, you know, not all, but let's say half maybe, would talk about the precipice of society. You know, I have a bet with one of the women I photographed named Talia that I'll be able to drive to her in 5 years. And if I can drive to her, then she owes me a favor. So that's our bet. We have it in writing.
Right. I call those disaster babies.
Right. Yeah. But the thing is, and there's all these conversations around campfires about the end of society. But because it's actually pretty fun to live in a community, even with those, whatever the process and the hardship might be, and getting there, it's fun in the meantime, and it's rewarding and satisfying in the meantime.
And it's fun to disaster bait.
And it's fun to disaster bait, sure.
It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.